Thank you. So welcome to this packed house today. Welcome to the Rutgers alumni joining us online for our Inside Politics 2026 event. So I'm Sarah Kozak, the Director of Alumni Relations at Eagleton and the Education Program Manager. This event kicks off our 70th anniversary year. The Institute was founded in 1956 by Florence Peshine Eagleton, who is a suffragist and founder of the New Jersey League of Women Voters, with a clear request to advance learning in practical politics and government so knowledge and meaning of democracy may be increased through education of young men and women. So I think with that, we can all agree that this mission is more important today than ever. We are a nonpartisan institute with education programs for students across Rutgers, New Brunswick, Newark, Camden, and Rutgers Health campuses. The first program that was founded back in 1957 was the Eagleton Graduate Fellowship Program. This year's cohort of graduate students from across Rutgers joins us in the room today, along with a cohort of postdoc researchers in our Science and Politics Fellowship Program, as well as the juniors in our undergraduate associate cohort. Our fireside panel discussion focuses on national headlines, the midterm elections, and Governor Sherrill's administration the first 100 days in office, with a panel of Eagleton alumni experts in higher education and politics field. So with us today, our panel includes Dworkin, who is from the Institute of Public Policy and Citizenship at Rowan University, Micah Rasmussen, the Rebovich Institute for New Jersey Politics at Rutgers University, Chris Shields, who directs our Eagleton Center on the American Governor, as well as our Science and Politics program, and Ginger Schnitzer, our Director of Education and Strategic Initiatives here at Eagleton, who will lead the discussion. So today's session will be recorded and posted online afterwards, so we do ask that everyone in the room please put your devices away. So with that, thank you, and on to the discussion.
All right, let's hear it for Sarah Kozak. While you're clapping, Gloria Miners back there, who are a lot for this. I know my whole life this year. I love this. Welcome to Inside Politics 2026, where the national headlines are wild, the midterm buzz is loud, and New Jersey's future is, well, probably stuck on the turnpike. Thanks for joining us. If you came for calm and predictable politics, you might be in the wrong room. But if you came for Jersey, baby, you're definitely in the right place. So it's great to see so many politically minded students here today. It's the only time you'll probably hear, I pulled an all-nighter and not know whether it was for an exam or because you were scrolling election results in CD11, which, by the way, is still in a tie, I understand. So with that, I also want to welcome our alum who are Zooming in. I would say it's great to see you. I hope it's great to see us. With that, gentlemen, when you look at the headlines right now, what feels like noise and what actually matters? I think I need some help cutting through this. And I don't care who wants to start. You don't have to go on with it. You'll be voluntold. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Ginger. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for watching. I think the noise, as Ginger referred to it, is an old construct when you have the Trump administration. We used to think of, well, that's the fluff that just gets said, and this is the real substance. And that world doesn't really exist. As the president bobs and weaves as he talks about, I'm reminded of that line from the movie The Sum of All Fears, Tom Clancy movie. Morgan Freeman turns to young CIA analyst Ben Affleck, playing Jack Ryan, and he says, be careful about the words you use. Words have a funny way of becoming policy. That's what we have. There is no noise because everything, the president says something. I want to nationalize elections. I want my name on the Lincoln Tunnel or whatever it is, right? Or the Holland Tunnel. And then there's some member of Congress who's going to put in a bill to do that. And so it's not noise, it actually becomes something. Then they go to Speaker Johnson, they say, hey, what do you think about renaming the tunnel? And he doesn't want to sit there and say, oh, I disagree with the president. You know, he's not even to wait until after he's finished his wonderful term. No. And so it becomes suddenly a thing, and there is no noise. I mean, I think, look, ICE is an issue, election integrity is an issue, the economy very much matters, but those are just priorities. I think there's less noise than we think of because a lot of this stuff actually becomes part of the political process.
You know, I think another way to think about that, which is maybe saying the same thing in a different way, is that it's all noise and it all matters, right? But you sort of can't separate maybe between what's noise and what matters because it's all there. And that's partially because it's been weaponized in certain ways, I think, by people, by institutions, by administrations. But there's also another element to, I think, why there's so much quote unquote noise right now, and that's the way that we consume. It's the way that we consume news now. It's the way that sort of fire hose of information that comes at us. It feels like noise all the time because it's everything. It's always everything. There aren't as many gatekeepers now, which I think is a good thing, potentially at least, but that means that we're always getting all of it. And I think the danger is, and part of the reason it's been weaponized in this way, is that at times it feels like so much noise that you just get overwhelmed and you want to sort of just shut it all down, right? Sort of step away from all of it because there's so much noise. And my advice to you in terms of sort of figuring out between noise and what matters, figure out what matters to you, right? What's the thing of all the noise that's out there? What's the piece of that noise that matters to you? Focus on that. Do something about that. Because that's how you can sort of fight through that noise. And we're all going to have our different things, right? We're all going to have that thing that matters the most to us. If we all focus on those things, then we make progress on all the noise. If we all try to do everything, to me, that doesn't work.
I think I'm really tempted to say that what matters is what's real, what's in the here and now. There's a danger to that. The danger is by the time it becomes real, it's too late. But you know, when there is a body on the ground, that's when it's real. When there is, in a much less dramatic way, turnout is real, right? People who turn out to vote is real. 62,000 people coming out to vote on a Thursday in February when there's ice on the ground. 2 years ago in 2024, in the regular primary in New Jersey 11, 52,000 voters came out. So, you know, there is a real hunger there. Democrats are walking across ice to vote, literally, the opposite of hot coals. That's real. Those are real, tangible things, things that matter. But, you know, there's a real danger. If you wait until it becomes real, then it's already too late, right? So that's what we have to try and sift through is what's actionable. But you know, I'm tempted to say it's what's in front of us, but I realize that can be reactionary.
So I'm hearing that it's either all noise or not noise, but we got to pay attention to it all, and that what we should focus on is what we can do things about. And you know, it's funny, when I was preparing the question, the thing that came to my mind, if I were on the panel and answering it, I'm not, but I'll say it anyway, is that for me, what's real is not each little individual thing that, I shouldn't say real, the thing that little one-offs of an issue here or there are interesting, but for me, what matters is what effect does it have on the larger system? Like, okay, this happened, but how does it impact separation of powers? Okay, this happened, but how does it impact, you know, what we consider appropriate for the power of any branch of government, whether it be the judiciary or the executive branch, the legislative branch. That's kind of what I've been watching. So as we move deeper into a midterm year, what should we be watching most closely in New Jersey and nationally? Not just in terms of outcomes, but like signals about where power, policy, and public opinion are heading. Like, as we're consumers, you know, we're actors in this great democracy, but we're also consumers of a lot of news, and a lot of people here are pretty pretty engaged with the headlines and the elections. What should we be looking for?
Well, as this is going to, all politics is national now, right? It's turned on its head, right? When I sat in this room, all politics was local, right? Talked about Tip O'Neill, and we are very much in a nationalist environment. However, I will say that in New Jersey, the ground has shifted monumentally. With the end of the line, with the party leaders' loss of control of the party, not the candidate selection process, the ground has shifted. And we saw this last night in New Jersey 11. The party leaders no longer have the chance and the opportunity to screen candidates. And that is exciting, and it's unpredictable, and it can lead to what we've seen in much of the rest of the country that already has this system in place, which is sometimes performative politics, sometimes squad, right? All things that are incredibly exciting that we really haven't had a lot of in New Jersey so much. So, this is how you get, and I'm not saying this is necessarily a bad thing that Alumni may have won this election at all. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying you get what you get in the rest of the country now. You get it here. We don't have the chance, party leaders don't have the chance to moderate our elections anymore, moderate our candidates anymore, or bring us back to the middle. And it's going to lead to more unpredictable results. It's exciting. It's more exciting to watch elections in New Jersey than it ever has been before. And so, we're getting these unpredictable results in cycle after cycle. What I think we will have to watch as time goes on, and what this signals is whether or not that doesn't just result in changes in who's running and who's winning, but how does that change policy as a result? How does that affect what policy gets passed? We still have the majority of our public officials are still out of that moderating environment. So as that changes, will our policy change as well?
Even if Malinowski wins, that's like into the county.
Yeah.
One thing that I would add, you guys are much better experts on this part, certainly than I am. The one thing I would add is something that actually Micah, you referenced earlier in terms of what to watch is turnout. And particularly not just what the turnout numbers are, but who is turning out, who is motivated to come vote. We like to say here that politics is not a spectator, that democracy is not a spectator sport, right? The squeaky wheel in democracy. So who is showing up, who is motivated, who is energized, who is engaged? I think that's one of the things you can sort of keep an eye on as you go forward. And then the other thing is polling. And I don't think Ashley's here. I think she's watching on video, so hi, Ashley. But I am not a big fan of the horse race polling, just sort of, who's up by 3 points, who's up by 2 points. But I think polling has a tremendously valuable use when it comes to sort of understanding what are the things that are important to people in a snapshot moment, in a given moment. So I think there's a lot that we can do with, as polls are released, getting under the hood and sort of understanding what are the things that are motivating people right now? What are the things that people are really interested in right now? I think that's another place we can look.
I'd suggest that we the turnout is a good point there. I think both parties, this is what we have to watch for. Both parties are facing a reckoning, and it's going to come. And history books 50 years from now will talk about when the Democratic Party had to challenge this. The way we talk about, when the Democratic Party adopted civil rights in its platform, and it became a thing. And we are going to see Democrats are going to have the reckoning and Republicans are going to have the reckoning right now. And it's going to happen in your lifetime. So that's, I think, both exciting and terrifying if you're highly partisan, because it's a whole new world in which these fights are happening. The Democrats are facing a challenge between liberals and the left. Here's my definition of, or distinction between the two. The liberals want to work through the system. They're progressive. They have progressive ideas. They vote for minimum wage hikes. They vote for abortion rights and any number of things that, if you're a Democrat, you think that's what Democrats should be doing. But they work through the system. The left thinks the system is what is holding back any major progress, and that you have to upend the system. whether it's the line or whether it is any kind of power structure within the party. These are the things that's going to be the fight. And where it's going to relate to, I know we're going to sort of jump into Micah Sherrill, is that she's going to have to weigh in on this stuff. If Mejia is able to pull this out, and she's ahead by a couple hundred votes, at least the last article I saw, that's going to be a big deal there. That isn't going to end, even with the 4 elections that she's got, or 3 more that she'll have after this. And it's going to affect other parts of politics. The Republicans obviously have to figure out what they're going to do post-Trump, assuming there is a post-Trump. And that will be, that's going to be a challenge. Are they going the J.D. Vance way? Are they going the Marco Rubio way? Is there going to be some resurgence of the Chris Christie wing of the party? Are they going to have an influence, a kingmaker kind of role? Because you're going to need them. That is going to be issues. So I think that's what as we head into the midterm, your question was, right? What should we be looking for? I think these are the early stages of this larger war that each party is going to have to go through.
Fair enough. I was watching your eyes, and did anybody want to comment after that, or am I misreading the panel?
I think we can keep going, right? Yeah.
Right, yeah.
We could, yeah, but I think some of what I want to say ties into your other question.
Fair enough, fair enough. Okay, so then you mentioned New Jersey specifically, so let's look at New Jersey specifically. What stands out to you about Governor Sherrill's early approach to governing so far? And how much of that reflects New Jersey's political culture versus broader national pressures?
I think Micah's point that all politics is national is very appropriate, talking about this particular question. About a year and a half into Phil Murphy's first term, I had an opportunity to host him at Rowan, and in the stairwell, as I was trying to walk him in a security detail back to the car, I said, Governor, I just want to ask you one question. What has surprised you about being governor? And he turned to me and he said, look, I understood party politics. I understood the whole legislature and the power brokers. What I didn't expect was how much I was going to have to deal with Trump. And I think that is something that Micah Sherrill just as easily gets said. She has been there for a couple of weeks, and she's had to deal with ICE because of the national situation changing, as you talked about. And now she's got to deal with Gateway, which is critical to not just to New Jersey and New York. We should understand it's critical to the entire economy of the East Coast, because you can't get things north whenever you build or produce in the South, and you can't get things south whenever you build and produce in the north, unless you've got these tunnels working. And they're both over 100 years old, and they flood every time we have anything close to Sandy. So that has been she hasn't had a chance to govern. I think what we are expecting in terms of her approach, in terms of Governor Sherrill's approach, she used this phrase in the election. I think we're going to see a lot of it. Ruthless efficiency. She wants to lower costs. Everybody does. It's hard to lower costs because there's a lot of things that people want to spend money on, and the national economy doesn't make everybody. Not a lot the governor can do. What she can do is make sure that you don't have the cost of time spent in dealing with government. Her focus is going to be on reducing wait times. And that's everything from the Motor Vehicle Commission to getting your real ID, if you haven't done that already, to permits to build an addition on your house or to have some new development. That's the way she'll justify. Look how we have made your time is valuable. We've reduced wait times in government because of our ruthless efficiency. Josh Shapiro is going to be her model. And if she can pull that off, I think, as he's proven to be pretty successful in Pennsylvania, that's going to be her approach, where she's going.
I'm saying, Ben, though, you're like ruthless efficiency, right? There's ruthless efficiency with process, and there's ruthless efficiency without process. Like, does that mean that ICE doesn't have to get judicial warrants? That's a bit more efficient if they could, right? So how does that play? Because I think on the executive level, we are seeing some ruthless efficiency. We've never had a more sealed border than we have now.
But I think in the things that she is focused on, it's efficiency that will help the average New Jerseyan. And so that's just how you interact with government. Remember, this is, I've been struck by this because I think people, forget this. Phil Murphy showed up after 8 years of Chris Christie. There was a huge amount of progressive ideas and legislation they wanted to do. And over the last 8 years, largely they did. She is coming in at a very different time. She doesn't have some massive wish list that she's promoted of new progressive ideas. This is about making the whole thing work well. And I think that's going to be her approach because it's not coming after 8 years of Chris. She's coming out 8 years of Phil Murphy, and that gives her a different playing field.
I guess these other guys too. And thank you, Ben.
I'm thinking a lot about along the same lines that Ben is, and I would say that the time is money, and the efficiency is a way for her to demonstrate that she understands the frustrations of New Jersey. It's a way for her to look and appear to be responsive. It's also cheaper than funding an entire progressive agenda. We have had 8 years of expansion in the state budget, and more resources were found by Governor Murphy by raising taxes and raising revenue when he needed to raise those. I think we're seeing some early signs from Governor Sherrill that she is more of a fiscal hawk than certainly he was, and that we may be going back into an era in Trenton, not of fiscal expansion and not of big growth in the budget, but something that we were used to as staffers, which was there's not enough money to go around, and pick your priorities because we can't fund everything. And so I think we are maybe re-entering that period, not only in recognition of where we've come in 8 years, which is sort of about as far as the elasticity can go, but also somebody whose approach may be more fiscally conservative than what we've seen under government.
Yeah, I'd add that my glasses come on. I went to the eye doctor and I told him I thought I needed a new prescription because I had to take my glasses off to read. And he said, "Well, why don't you just take your glasses off to read?" So that's why you make more money. I think a couple things. I think so. Number one, she's coming from a different place as well, right? She's coming from the House of Representatives. Her experience is in that environment, in that context, her political experience, and it at the federal level, right, at the national level. So that is a difference. Phil Murphy had a very different and fairly unique, right, background as he was coming in as governor in terms of what his experience was. So that's one thing. I think number two, the thing that we maybe don't think about it's a funny thing that we don't think about as often as we maybe should. Comparing to when Phil Murphy came in to when Micah Sherrill is coming in, we had a global pandemic, right? And I think we do forget that 2020, that COVID changed everything. And it has continued to change everything. And that's budget-wise, that's health-wise, that's policy-wise. There are all these sort of different tentacles that COVID has had. And I think we don't think about as much now, but that we feel without realizing it on a daily basis. So I think we are in a post-COVID world, or if we call it post, right? As she comes in, which makes a difference. The last thing I would say is what I think is really interesting, and I teach in this room, right? I teach governors in this room to some of you who are here. I've taught in this room before, but so I'll sort of go in that direction a little bit and talking about the governorship in general, and going back to what Micah was saying before, which is that the role of the governor has gotten much more national in the last, particularly again since COVID, but even a little bit before COVID. Going back to 2016, even going back to sort of the Obama administration, when you had a lot of attorneys general starting to sue the federal government. We've seen the governor take much more of a role on the national stage than we used to. Early in my career, we spent a lot of time talking about how governor's races are state races. You run on state issues, you win on state issues. Gretchen Whitmer became governor of Michigan because she wanted to fix the damn roads, right? Those are the issues that you run on. I don't think that's as true anymore. I think that's changed, or at least is changing. And I think what was really interesting, if you look at where we've seen Micah Sherrill so far, The Daily Show, right? She's done a lot of these sort of interviews with the national networks. It makes some sense in New Jersey, but she could have chosen to do much more New Jersey specific things, and she did. If you look at her inaugural address, the thing that surprised me in her inaugural address a little bit was how much of it was directly at the Trump administration. Right? It was a direct response to what she sort of foresaw coming or has been happening at the national level. How that translates into action, I don't think we know yet. But certainly what she's talking about, what she has us thinking about, is stuff more on the national stage. And I think that that's a shift nationwide, but I think that that's a particular shift in New Jersey. Phil Murphy dealt with Trump in a little bit of a different way, right? So I think, why is that happening? Part of it is that national trend. I think also that you have to look back in November as well, right? Why did she win? Why did she win by 14 points? Well, part of it, we go back to turnout. Part of it, we go back to who turned out and why. And part of that is because people were voting against the Trump administration, right, against Trump. So there are New Jersey reasons for her to be taking that approach, but there are also these sort of national trends.
As we talk about checks and balances, as you did, voters clearly very much want, at this moment, somebody who will stand up to the White House, somebody who will provide some balance to the White House. They want a fighter. They said this last night. They said this with the governor's race in November. But I think Sherrill will have a lot of latitude where the harms from the White House are particular to New Jersey, where it's not seen as just a proxy for 2028 or jockeying for, and I'm not saying she is jockeying for a spot on the ticket. I'm not saying that at all. But where it is just generic Democratic politics, that's where I think voters will have fatigue with it. Where it's tied to specific New Jersey harms, I think she'll have all the runway.
I just want to, this is where we could really jump in. A couple things. First of all, I think in terms of not just Sherrill's approach coming as a former member of Congress, but that she's a Navy veteran. I think the military pilot, somewhere you heard the helicopter. But I think the military background, the military academy background, gives her a very unique understanding from other governors that we've had in terms of how power works, who takes direction, how you lead. This has been shaped by her upbringing. A family that has been in the military, that she went, husband did. This is, I think, going to affect, when she says ruthless efficiency, she is talking about process. And I think that is part of her background that we should look for ways it's manifesting itself as her leadership goes forward. The other thing is referencing, yes, the inaugural speech, which built on, and more specifically, but it built on the themes of the campaign. She had a very specific challenge in this campaign because the Democratic base, the people she had to turn out, were furious about the president. At the same time, she did not want this to be about the future of democracy. She did not want to be this about whether we are heading towards an authoritarian government. Other people have done that, and they tended to sometimes win and sometimes lose. She needed to talk about affordability, and what she did with tremendous discipline, because there was real pressure there, was to say it is Trump who's causing your life to be unaffordable in New Jersey. It is Trump, because of the tariffs, who's affording you to pay more. It is Trump, because of his economic policies, that is making New Jersey unaffordable. That link meant she was able to stay focused for the independent voters, the non-partisan people who are, some things I don't like about Trump, some things I do, that you are critical to win in this election. She didn't have to go throw the red meat out to the Democratic base. They were already there. They were going to vote for the Democrat here. But she really kept focus on linking the administration to the affordability issues of New Jerseyans. She did that in her speech, in her inaugural speech. And I expect that, yes, she's going to step. I mean, what's interesting the last 2 weeks is that she's had to step up on non-affordability related things like ICE. But wait, Gateway Tunnel lends itself right to it. So she'll have to respond to the issues of the day as they emerge. But I think that's going to be her focus there, because she's got to balance both her party and well as just the fact that you have to govern as a state that has to do with the federal government.
And she'll be judged on those affordability issues moving forward too.
Yeah,
so that's absolutely front of mind.
Excellent. All right. Well, so if you were inside the governor's office right now, what would feel most urgent and why?
So I think it's that affordability stuff for sure, because it's a tough taskmaster, and you only have to look back at how high Trump was riding affordability in the 2024 election, and how quickly people blamed affordability on him and his lack of ability to tame them, to see how fast that can turn. And let's face it, a lot of this is completely out of Governor Sherrill's control. The price of electricity, the price of your utility bills, those are going to be driven by how much PJM can purchase electricity from these auctions, and it's not going to be determined by rate cases in New Jersey even. That will affect delivery charges. It's not going to affect the price of the commodity. And so if I were in the front office, I would be up at night thinking about the price of electricity and how long until we're getting blamed for that. How long until that becomes our problem? And what can I do in the meantime? The other problem, of course, with that particular part of affordability is she knows that she needs more electricity. She knows she needs a lot more electricity. Problem is, to build out that capacity, that generation, costs money, right? It's impact on your bills. So it certainly helped get her elected. She tackled the electricity question masterfully. She took that right away from the Challengers Party, from Jack Ciattarelli. Jack Ciattarelli, by all rights, should have had that issue, and she took it away from him smartly. But it can bite her, certainly in her re-election race, and before that, if voters say, hey, what have you done about this lately?
I'm looking at my science fellows. Figure this out, guys. This is on you. I'm gonna give a really literal answer to your question, Ginger, which is the budget. It's the budget. This is why the New Jersey governorship is the job that everybody wants until they get it. Because as soon as you get it, you've got to deal with the budget. And that's a particularly difficult thing in New Jersey for a number of reasons. Number one, we have an annual budget in New Jersey, so we have to do this every single year. We have to go through this budget process. Number two, the way that the cycle works, if you're a new governor coming in, you really are coming in midstream a little bit. There's a lot of work that gets done on the budget in the fall. You take office in January, you're already behind. So they're already playing catch up on the budget. New Jersey, like most states, maybe all states, requires a balanced budget. We can't print money in New Jersey. We can't print our own money, so the budget has to be balanced. And there's a drop dead deadline on June 30th that cannot be changed. If it's not done, state goes into a government shutdown. And for a new governor, that's a big deal, right? Because a new governor is coming in, trying to maintain her credibility, trying to show that she's in charge, trying to sort of consolidate the power. New Jersey governor is a very powerful office, but it can ebb and flow a little bit. So trying to sort of consolidate that power. And then you're dealing with a budget, and a budget this year where there are structural deficits. So you come in with these promises, right? You come in with these things that you want to do, and you're immediately faced with the fact that you've got to cut stuff because you promised not to raise taxes. So this is a real challenge. This is a really difficult place for her. But it's also sort of the first big policy document that we're going to see come out of the governor's office. So we're going to get a sense, I can tell you the three of us, I'm certain, will immediately start parsing through it, right? To try to figure out what are her priorities. Because the budget indicates what your priorities are. That's what the budget is, right? Because you're making decisions. You're putting your money where your mouth is, literally, the budget. So it's a really important document for the state. It's a really important policy document to understand what it is that she cares about. And the message that she's going to send with it, if I were in that office, I would be saying, this is our laser focus. This is what we have to figure out. Because they don't really have a choice.
If I were, as you said, inside the Sherrill's governor's office, I'd probably first be asking who the heck let me in. Why are you listening to that person? Look, I was going to say the budget as well. It's the first thing you're showing up. This is a document that gets prepared over an 11-month period. And they are coming in January 21st, and it's got to be settled. It's got to be introduced. The whole thing's got to be introduced in February, maybe early March if they put it off, and then it's got to be negotiated to pass. So I would echo all the things that Chris just said. The thing that I would keep me up. I won't say keep me up, but most urgent, most front of line is that they have got to learn Trenton. Now this might be self-serving because the four of us teach this stuff, and therefore we think Trenton and understanding Trenton is really important. Because we make a living from saying it's really important. You have to learn and take my class. But it is important. And you have a male-dominated legislature where you have a tremendous network of old relationships that have been built over time, over years of dinner parties at the League, a municipalities convention, and other things. And you have, even coming from New Jersey, but from Washington, an outsider, a chief of staff who was her chief of staff for a congressional candidate. You've got folks. I thought it was fascinating when I talk about ruthless efficiency. I thought it was fascinating that they went on a national search for the head of the MDC, and they picked. I think she was Oregon.
Colorado.
Colorado. No, it was Colorado. Right. And they brought them in. Like, that is the most patronage jobs you're going to give out if you're going to be governor. It's like, who's going to run the MDC? Come on. And you go out and say, no, we want someone who really knows how to reduce wait times. I think that is a clear understanding of where she's going. She's going to have to learn.
Doesn't know jug handles, but wait times.
and that's going to be the problem. Yeah. Because the legislature's not going to stop doing things the way they do it. They have their own agenda. They're going to pass stuff, and it's going to show up on the governor's desk, and she's then going to have to decide, hey, we should have coordinated. No, I don't want this. Well, if you have all these outside people who are still trying to figure out who's in, the difference between CD11 and NJ11, that's going to be an issue. And I think that is, no, everybody should take our classes.
Well, to tie those things together a little bit, I think, and my background's in history, not political science, so I like to think of things in historical, right, terms, historical examples. And if you look at New Jersey history, I think two places to look right now: John Corzine, right, his first budget process, and I'll throw a plug in for our site, right, where we have a roundtable discussion with Corzine and a number of people from both the legislature and his administration talking about that process. Similar situation in some ways. Difficult budget. He was coming in from the Senate, not from the House, but coming in from the federal level, and did not have a significant understanding of how New Jersey politics works. That ended up in a government shutdown, the first in state history, which arguably he won. But still, I don't think that'll happen this year. But that is, and he also, by the way, had a Democratic legislature. Sometimes those fights within a party can actually be more difficult than the ones between the two parties. So just the fact that she has a Democratic legislature doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be easy. Right?
Micah, you talked about this in class this last week, right?
There you go, right? And then the other example I would look at that Ben referenced is this is also the second woman to be governor of the state of New Jersey, the first Democratic woman to be governor of the state of New Jersey. And if you look at Christine Todd Whitman in her early days, particularly her relationship with the legislature, there were these issues, right, with the Old Boys Network, that gender played an important part in the early days of the Whitman administration. So I think it's important that we not ignore that here, right? That gender is a really important part of both the approach that she will take and the response that she will get as she goes forward as well. So looking at those examples, I think is useful.
It's interesting you bring up the gender angle, Chris, because I mean, the capital culture in Trenton has changed a lot since Chris Whitman was governor in the 90s. Like back in the 90s, there was this Lorenzo Steakhouse, and everybody used to, like, after it had the station, the boys would go there and drink and have cigars, and women didn't feel comfortable in that. Now Trenton, there's not a lot of like capital culture. So I think that Micah Sherrill is a woman governor in sort of a little bit of a different dynamic, but I think it's well taken, the points you made, Ben, as well. I mean, I couldn't agree with the panel more on affordability, on the budget, but Ben, I'm with you that you don't get to pass an affordability agenda, and you don't get to pass a budget unless you have a relationship with the legislature. No matter what she wants to do with rates, she can sign 1 million EOs. That's like Amanda was telling us this morning in class for the graduate students. That only gets you so far, right? If you want to change laws, if you want something that's permanent, You need to go to those other 120 people in the other branch of government. And the thing that stood out to me about her first days is that she understood that. Like when you see, I saw pictures on social media, and then I later talked to him, and know that like within 2 days after the election, she was sitting with John DeMaio, the Assembly Republican, right? And that like she understands, while she has Alex Ball as her chief, you know, she understands that she has to learn Trenton, and she's going to have to make an effort to build those kinds of relationships. What do you say, Micah?
Anybody who comes to Trenton from Capitol Hill, from this room, anywhere, says, why the heck do we do things this way? Like, why in the world, right? We're going to tame them. We're going to tell them how to do it, right? That is inevitably, we've watched it over 30 years, right? Everybody thinks they've got a better life. And then they proceed to eat you alive. And so it's one of the most important voices in this administration right now, for that very reason. It's really important. The Alex Balls of the world need to know, they know Micah Sherrill better than anybody, and that's really, really important too. But one of the most important voices in this administration is Tim Lyden, the chief counsel. He was the executive director of the Senate Democrats, and when you see her getting it, sitting down with DeMaio, it is because there is that legislative voice and that balance in the administration. They really have to make sure they listen to him. So far, they are.
Yeah. And not to mention, she's hired some Eagleton graduates to do legislative work. So
That's always a
anyway, so what is one issue in New Jersey that could quietly become a major political story this year?
I'll say I sort of have a real answer and kind of a weird answer to that one. The real answer we've already talked about, and maybe it's already sort of become a major, but I think for the average resident, the average citizen, maybe it's not understood. It's going to be more understood as gateway. I think that's an issue that in infrastructure in general, maybe that has started to sort of break through, but maybe hasn't quite gotten there yet. But it's so important, as I was saying before, just for the entire East Coast, right? The entire Eastern Seaboard. It's a critical issue, and it is one of these sort of example issues of the way the federal administration works, right? The way these sort of things are happening right now. And I think that's going to get more and more traction as we go forward. So I think that's a big one with infrastructure. The kind of weird one that I think is going to be interesting, you know, the World Cup final is going to be played in New Jersey this year. And there are a lot of reasons. That's a lot of attention. That's a lot of focus.
That's a lot of transportation.
It's a lot of transportation. It's a lot of infrastructure, right? It's a lot of people stuck in Secaucus, unable to get to the Meadowlands. And it's this sort of opportunity. It's this hub point, right? It's this opportunity when there's going to be a lot of attention on the United States. There's going to be a lot of attention on New Jersey, and how the federal administration and the state administration sort of work together or don't on that. I think is going to be really interesting. So that's kind of a weird answer maybe, but that's one to jump in.
Micah, what do you got?
Well, I'm glad we're not afraid to go weird. I think last night was an earthquake as far as New Jersey politics is concerned. The idea of the party leaders not being able to control that process, not really having anything to say about that process of who gets nominated for Micah Sherrill's seat for Congress, to replace her in Congress. So I think what you're going to start to see, I don't know if it'll be immediately, but over time, is a realization, grudgingly, that they no longer control this process. And so things that they have, the leaders have maybe rebuffed in the past, like ranked choice voting, for example. Why do we need that? Well, you know, what's the use of that, right? Andrew Ricker's had that bill around for a long time. I think that the party may start to realize we can't control the process anymore, but the best we can hope for maybe is to get some consensus around the nomination, right? Especially one of the most immediate impacts of the post-line environment is that lots of good candidates are entering these races. Great candidates, right? We talked about 4 as the top of the field last night, but there were really good candidates all the way through that 10 or 11 candidates in the field. And maybe we can start to get some consensus if voters, if if at least half the voters are going to agree on who the nominee is going to be, that's at least something, right? We may not control the process, but somebody will. We're not just going to have a complete splintering of the electorate and somebody wins with a fraction of the electorate. So that's one reform you may start to see. Another reform you may start to see, and these are not all of them certainly that may come out of this thought process, but apparently Mejia did really well because of her ballot placement, right? Because she was first in Essex County and second in Morris County. Something that's been talked about for a while and never has gotten any traction. Our ballot machines could randomize order. Why don't we do that, right? And the clerks have said, we don't need to do that. Why are we going to worry about that? Well, maybe a more even distribution produces not as much of an advantage for just whoever happens to get the top ballot position across all the board.
So I want to touch on, I'll go weird and then more in a second. Look, it's not weird, but I think the governor is going to be drawn in to the fights that the Democratic Party is going to face. And it will be expected that how is she going to take control of the Democratic Party infrastructure in the Democratic State Committee? She's the head of the party. So what is she going to do? Is she going to really try to say we're going to reshape it and say we're going to work in this image? Is she going to start pushing through the party different reforms? I think that will weigh in here, and it's the sort of the issue we're not thinking about. But I think there are these ripple effects that are going to happen down the road. A more tangible thing that I would suggest we are not really paying attention to is Atlantic City. Atlantic City has got 23,000 people employed in its casinos. It's got tens of thousands more who are employed indirectly, vendors and things like that. And New York City is about to build 3 casinos. Now, they are not in Manhattan. They're in Queens, and 2 in Queens and 1 in the Bronx. But still, that direct close, it's not schlepping up the Mohegan, it's not all the way out there. It's really close. And you can't ignore the dismantling of Atlantic City. And so I think we are not appreciating the kind of investment and vision and political power it's going to take and will be required to get the year-round resort idea adopted by Atlantic City, because you can't just compete. You're going to be able to shoot crap a lot of places now.
Online too.
And online. But look, Atlantic City has its own online. So that's there. And the fact is, all the places, resorts and valleys, they have Atlantic City facilities as well as New York City facilities.
Do you mind if I jump in? Because there's another pressure there, and I'm not going to take 30 seconds, and you have the floor back. The racetrack owners are now looking for casinos there to save the racing industry in New Jersey. And, repeatedly, New Jersey voters have said, no, we only want casinos in Atlantic City. But that's an additional pressure.
No, I appreciate my good work. Thank you.
I hope I didn't just steal your thunder.
It's all right. I'll say yes. Racinos, as they call them, is what there are folks who say, look, we don't want it. 2016, they had a statewide referendum. Nobody wanted gambling outside of Atlantic City. That's going to come back. Maybe it's just, okay, we only want it at Monmouth Park in the middle. Right. But these are all parts of how we deal with what is, and effectively, the biggest industry in South Jersey. And so I think that is something not on anybody's radar screen right now, but something that will be over the next 12 months.
I'm glad I asked the question. So a year from now, what do you think we'll say we totally misunderstood about this moment? This has been a brilliant and interesting discussion, but if we roll the tape back, or if we watch the recording next year, what do you think we might have misunderstood?
I don't want to answer first, but can I just say I just want to say it's a ridiculous question, because you're asking the 3 of us, like, what are you getting wrong? I think I'm smart.
I'm asking you to be reflective.
I think New Jersey progressives have arrived, and they've arrived everywhere. If they've arrived in suburban North Jersey, Micah Sherrill territory, they've arrived, and they can flex their muscles. And this has been something that, again, the line and sorry if I sound like a broken record, have allowed the party to sort of keep them and hold them at bay. I think they are now as unleashed and upon us. And I'm not saying this is a value judgment as a good thing or a bad thing. I'm simply saying that the Democrats now fully have to contend with that. Just as Republicans have had to contend with their factions, the factions within the Democratic Party are fully upon us.
Yeah, I would say, first of all, Ginger, I think we're going to need more than a year. I think we're going to need more space than that, more distance than that, to really sort of understand what we're missing about the political moment. But my prediction would be, as historians look back on this moment, as political historians look back, I have no data to back this up. This is totally sort of, but I think that we are missing the extent to which wealth and income disparity are the driving forces of what's happening politically and social culturally. What's sort of driving everything that's going on.
I would suggest, not that that's unimportant, but I would describe what I'm about. The fact that I'm going to bring up is exactly that thing, that is, we don't appreciate how much it's driving everything. And that is the internet. I think we are going to face a backlash against tech. I think that anybody who has kids sees how draining it is. And while the internet has done a great number of things and allows us to access information and get tickets and do whatever it is we want to do, it has certainly done two things that affects our politics, and I think negatively in a way. One is that it makes everything faster. And the other thing is that it makes everything customized. And politics, the process that we all teach, goes slow and revolves compromise. It's not customized. And so you end up with an electorate that demands results quickly, that does not have the patience to wait, which allows a person, a president with the skill set that he has of weaving from this to that to that to this. That's exactly how we scroll through our phones. And at some point, someone is going to have to figure out how to slow it down, because we move too fast. We don't read past the headline. My news thing, as I imagine most people in this room, right? I've got headlines that come from summaries, that come from synopses of an actual article. And I think there's going to be, that has created a very challenging electorate. And I think we will start to appreciate that. And there's going to be a parental movement to get your kids off the screen. And it'll start there, but it's for adults too. And we are going to have to deal with that, because it really, as you described, the wealth disparity, it just is shaping everything in our politics right now.
Not to mention AI.
Yeah. Right, I mean, all of it. The advent of AI, again, which does unique things. But I think it's the speed and customization that we are so used to, that we have, every time you have a situation that requires you to I have to stop. I use this, and I don't mean to be more, but the mourning of a loved one. Everything in my life goes fast. A parent or a grandparent passes away, and I can't get over it fast. It takes time. That is the sort of human interaction with the world we live in. And I think that extends to politics.
Yeah, so politics is meant to go slow, right? I mean, that's why the framers separated powers. That's why, right, it's part of the passive open control. I mean, this is supposed to be a slow, thoughtful, deliberative process that engages many people. And when it goes slow, so many people look at it and say, well, it's broken. What do you say, Mike?
The conversation took a turn with the morning, but we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about what happened at the Washington Post this week.
Yeah.
Because you talked about ultimately the headlines going back to a real live story. At this point, it's as likely that it's not going back to a real story. It's going back to something generated by AI. And so how the speed has affected journalism and destroyed journalism, and how we can even digest the information and how that affects our politics, is also something that we really have to stop and think about before it's entirely all gone.
I'm glad I asked. All right. So a lot of the folks in this room, I know we have spent time with them, and I'm sure we have alumni online as well. Like, what advice do you have to help people navigate this moment? Everybody here has something they want to change. I know that, right? Everybody here wants to be effective. Everybody here is studying this, and all of our alumni who are out there, many of them working in the field of policy and politics, but even those who are not, who just in terms of their own civic engagement, like, how do we navigate this moment in our politics? What do you need to do to be effective? How do you move the ball?
I like what Chris started out with, which was to say, we can't all pay attention to everything. Pay attention to what matters to you. And jump in. Figure out where your jumping in point is and jump in. And don't be afraid. Because in this environment, calling attention to something is what ultimately puts a stop to it, puts the brakes on it, or accelerates it. And boy, we really need that, and we hadn't thought of this. Don't assume, here's the advice, do not assume that somebody else has thought of it. Do not assume that somebody else has made the point that you've made. In this more and less democratic environment at the same time, we can all impact the process.
Yeah, I'd say that, of course, right? Sort of sticking with that sort of idea, find what it is that you're passionate about. Usually this is where I would sort of go in my get involved lecture, but I don't have to say that in this room, right? You're all already involved in it. So I'll say stay involved, right? Maybe you need to take a break here, but get back involved. When you do sort of stay involved in those things. And I like that sort of don't assume that Micah said, because the other thing I would say is don't assume that you don't belong. You belong. You should be there, right? Maybe you start local. I know Ginger preaches that, so I don't have to say that, right? You can make a real difference at a local level. Then you move on to the county level, then you move on to the state level, whatever it is that you want to do. Start local, make the difference in that space. But understand that every single one of you belongs in every space in politics, in every space in government. Don't be thinking, well, but my background is science, right? With my science fellows, or I come from, a humble town, or whatever. You belong because you bring experience that nobody else brings to the process. So get involved, bring that with you, and be in the space, be in the room, make yourself see. That's my advice.
I'd give a couple things here. First of all, as I kind of alluded to just a few moments ago, read the full article. Find a way to read the actual thing while the Post still exists, and the Wall Street Journal, the Times, and the major papers that do real reporting. Read the full thing. It is so great, and then you will be smarter than your boss, who is only relying on you to tell them what happened. Second, network like your life depended on it. The world is changing, and in a changing world, you will not stick with the same job year after year. At some point in your political lifetime, your boss is going to lose re-election, or there's going to be a new administration, or something will happen, and you will be laid off from whatever company you thought you were working. And it is at that moment you are going to call your friends and find out. So how many friends have you got to call if you were unemployed today? How many people? Well, you can call a couple professors, you can call your parents, maybe you've got a friend who's there. But any number of times people have called me, Micah and I. So I used to, just as a history, so I used to be at Rider University before I moved on to Rowan. Micah came in, and we had this conversation. I remember me on the phone. It's like, okay, here's what's good, here's what's bad, here's what it is. I'll put it a good word for you. That is what will matter in a world where people so easily can hate you online, and you can become some pariah because you flubbed a sentence, because of somebody's misinterpretation of something you did, said, work on, part of. Have a network in a real way, to have real relationships, not Facebook relationships. I know you guys don't use Facebook, not IG relationships, real relationships. The final thing that I would say, right? So read everything, never like your life depended on it. And finally, this is my sort of weird contribution here. Be a romantic. My favorite book in the world, you know this, right? My favorite book in the world is The Princess Bride. If you've seen the movie, trust me, the book is way better. And I offer that in a discussion on politics is because your commitment to being part of this is like your commitment to love. You know it will kick you, it will hurt you, it will break you, and yet you still believe you're going to find the one. And that is what keeps me going in politics, because it will kick me, it will disappoint me, it will frustrate me, and yet I know I was that kid who wrote a memo that turned into a law that became the model for a national law. And, you know, that makes all the difference because you believe in the things even when you don't feel it. And so yeah, I'm not particularly feeling loved or finding love right now, but I know it's out there. And I think that's what good politics is. It's out there. We just have to keep believing.
I have two things actually that Ben maybe thought of, because that's terrific. All of that is terrific. But one that I would not have thought of otherwise, but that has been a real change in my life over the last few years: read fiction. I went back to reading fiction a couple of years ago, and nothing changes your mindset like a really good work of fiction, a work of art fiction book. Read fiction. I know you're all very busy, right? And you're keeping up with coursework, you're keeping up with jobs, you're keeping up with internships. Ginger makes you read 6,000 pages a week, probably, right?
Yeah, I'm taking my class.
But find time to read fiction. Find a good list of great fiction from the last 10 years, 50 years, 100 years, and start to work through that list and do that. And the second goes along with that, and also goes along with reading the whole article, which is there are a lot of sort of personality attributes that I think you can work on to make yourself more successful in life and in this world. But one of the most important, be curious. Be curious. Look into stuff. If something strikes you as interesting, even if it has nothing to do with anything that you're working on, follow it. Go down the rabbit hole. Not like QAnon, but go down the rabbit hole a little bit, right? To sort of be curious, because curious people change things. It's curious people who actually make a difference, because they're the ones who sort of learn about a lot of different things and then bring that perspective of, why did we do this way, right? We can maybe do this differently. And that's how change starts.
And intellectual curiosity is a lot of the time what stands in for experience. Nobody expects you to have experience up front. Nobody's looking for that. What they want to know up front is, are you curious? Are you engaged? Are you interested? Are you willing to roll up your sleeves and jump in the full speed? That's what this will.
Yeah, I'm just reminded of the famous Robert F. Kennedy quote, not Junior, Robert F. Kennedy quote. Some people look at the world and ask why. I look at the world and ask why not. And I think it's one of those go-to people call out all the time, but it relates to this. It's just be curious, have a vision, think about how can we do this better.
Fair enough. Well, I think it's time to go to this audience for questions. I know you must have a bunch of them. So where can I be? I'm beginning with Chris.
Thank you for the presentation. I do have a question that hits on two different elements that were spoken about. One being this idea of a kind of reckoning with the political party, but also this concept of affordability and how it's utilized, right? Particularly how it was utilized in terms of understanding how we can tackle or use affordability to gain a seat. However, affordability issue with rising inequality specifically extends well beyond Trump's first administration. We're a country that really socializes the loss of the privatized gains, right? So, in the context of this party reckoning, and I believe it will happen along the lines of how we view the rising inequality as an issue. Do you believe that either major party, either party is actually substantially addressing this issue of rising income inequality, or is affordability just another kind of catchword?
I don't think it is a catchword. I would argue that the 8 years that Phil Murphy drilled down on a fairer New Jersey, and the things that he wanted to do, he wanted to help, who he was helping, right? He didn't help everybody. His college affordability programs, they were intended to help the people who needed the help the most, right? So I don't think it was a catchphrase for him. I think his policies did aim at hitting the people he wanted to hit, helping the people he wanted to help. I think it can be more. I think it can just be a catchphrase for a lot of people, for sure, for a lot of our public officials. But again, they're going to get burned by that if they don't do something about it pretty quick.
In the United States, as opposed to a lot of other countries, we are not a multi-party system, and mass parties have a lot of different voices that range in a lot of different ways about how to deal with it. So the party itself will need to come, each of them will need to come to a consensus on whether we're going to prioritize these kinds of issues and these kinds of responses or not. An individual like Phil Murphy, because he's in control effectively, we give the governor an immense amount of power in New Jersey, can drive that agenda in a particular state. Will it work in Pennsylvania? Will it work in Nevada? Will it work in any place else? That's part of a larger, I think that reckoning, we just have to understand it's coming within a mass party movement. So there are different voices, different interests, different forces that will emerge, and we'll see who organizes and who's able to dominate and to address that issue, or how we address the issue, or one of the options being not addressed.
Yeah, I would say that my question for any politician who uses the term affordability would immediately be, what do you mean by affordability? Because affordability has a lot of potentially different definitions, with it, both the benefit of it as a sort of political catchphrase, right, and the challenge in it as a governing, way of life. Is that it can mean lower taxes, right? You could be talking about affordable housing. You could be talking about education. You could be talking about transportation. You name a huge state or national issue, you can get it under the umbrella of affordability. So the question becomes, well, what do you mean when you say affordability? What are the sort of policy issues that you're thinking about, that you're talking about when you say the word affordability? Because I do think, in a broad sense, this is one of these places where the conversation that takes place in the sort of political realm between Democrats and Republicans, or between different types of Democrats, right, between different types of Republicans, doesn't always match the conversation and the reality on the ground, right, of what's happening and what the issues actually are for people on a daily basis. This is one of the places where that conversation isn't always connecting. And I think one of the reasons for that is because it's such a big term. It's great that we paid so much attention to it throughout the fall in terms of the gubernatorial race. I think that the challenge now is that we start to define what we mean by that.
It's not only define what we mean, it's too affordable for
whom, yeah.
Right? Like, so, cutting the capital gains tax makes life affordable for some economic sectors, and increasing the earned income tax credit, makes life affordable for a very different economic group, right? So, okay, great. Thank you, Chris. And I just want to see if I can get an undergrad in here. Do I have an undergrad that's going to go ahead?
Hi, thank you all for being here. While we were on the question of noise in politics, I kept thinking about accountability, because I think a lot of people are frustrated with seeing on both the national and the state level of how different things are happening, whether that's with ICE, whether that's with blatant disregard of certain constitutional rights and provisions, and certain high-profile people being implicated for various crimes. And I think it's hard for a lot of people to stay engaged and connected to politics and the smaller, or not smaller, but some of the more day-to-day issues like affordability or transportation, while also acknowledging that, our politicians and our systems, there's a lot happening, and feels like a lack of accountability. So I'm curious to know how you guys kind of address and navigate, or what you would recommend and advise us to balance accountability while still, caring about politics and feeling like we can actually have some type of change.
I'll take a step at that one. It gets back to my fast and slow kind of stuff, right? We expect it to go. I expect there to be accountability. It's right there. There's obvious aggression, this thing that crossed the line. And why is it taking so much time? Because we expect it to go, and yet we have to wait 2 years before we have a midterm election. We've got to wait. I think there are ways to draw attention to the accountability that you, people think like you, are doing. And there are two good examples, I think, that we saw, three so far. And it's mostly been, although Scott Garrett was a very conservative Republican up in North Jersey. Lots of Democrats ran against him. They all got like 41, 43% and lost. Wow. And then Josh Gottheimer showed up. Now, Josh Gottheimer, if you've met him, is a particular political personality, and it works. But one of the things that they did was that they went out to banks in particular, who were some of his biggest, Scott Garrett's biggest funders, and said, "Why are you supporting this person who's against LGBTQ rights?" And weekly protests outside Provident Bank and outside North Hudson Bank and outside any of these local banks, like freaking out because people are picketing not the congressman's office, but the bank who supported him. I think that drew attention to how conservative the guy was and absolutely helped propel him. You saw those protests against Frelinghuysen when Micah Sherrill was emerging, and there were lots of people who wanted to run against him. You're on appropriations, and there were just people picketing outside their office there. So those are, I think, ways to hold people accountable, hold their donors accountable. Well, you can't actually change anything until the next election, and you're stuck. Well, now I have to wait a whole other year. I've got other things to do. So anyway, that's the way I would try to approach that.
Yeah. I actually want to ask a question directly to Micah Rasmussen. So about 12 hours ago, you tweeted, and Jim left.
Here we go. Unplug. Listen to
There's a no chat.
Read the whole.
Sort of have another hotly contested primary in June for the full term.
Yeah.
I just want to get your insight into like what that's going to look like between, because we have such a short term between this primary and then what's going to be the full term.
Yeah.
How would you even suggest like someone like govern during that time, or what they should be doing that in such a short window?
There is nothing you can do to govern. First of all, we're talking about one member of Congress. The number of votes that they'll take, if it's Mania between now and June, it's going to be really small, right? She may have one big vote to take, right, at some point. But by the way, I should caution that there are a lot of folks who think I'm wrong about this. I mean, we're only talking about less than 24 hours later, that the party will start to coalesce behind the ultimate winner of of last night's election, and it will be harder for somebody within the party to take them on. They'll be sort of seen as an interim. There is that, okay? But what I'm responding to is two things. One, with such a close result, less than 1% separated, with 11 good people in the field, I think it's almost irresistible to say, hey, we really didn't get a clear result here. And we need voters to really weigh in again. That's number one. Number two, with 11 people in the field, nobody got a clean shot at anybody else, right? A one-on-one race would be very different than 11 people in the race. And so I think it's almost very tempting, almost too tempting, for somebody to say, let's say Malinowski does not wind up on top to this primary last night. How does he not say, if I just had a clean shot at her in June, I might be able to win this thing, right? Because she had the progressive lane to herself. I didn't. I shared the lane with everybody else, with all kinds of moderates. Without them in the race, I might be able to win this thing. So I'd be really tempted. We'll see what winds up happening. The timetable, as you say, the decisions that have been made on whether to get in the race for June. By the way, just so we're clarifying, June is the full primary for the full term. not the remaining term for Micah Sherrill's remaining term in office. This would be for the full term from January of 2027 through January 2029. So even though we're going to have a total of 4 elections this year, the special primary that we just had, the special general that we'll have in April, the full primary for the full term in June, and then the full general, I think it's almost irresistible for somebody to say, I'm going to take another shot at this thing.
Particularly given that Malinowski has kind of done that before,
Right,
right? He lost
right,
to Tom King
right,
Jr. and
absolutely.
then ran again.
Right,
So,
right.
so I would expect a few moves, and then changed, moved so that he can run again for Congress. So clearly he has an interest in getting back in Congress. That would be likely. So.
I'm gonna hand that to you. Go ahead.
Yes. So you spoke a little bit before about this sort of generational shift that we're seeing away from optimism about modern technology. And I'm really interested in that entire shift. But you also spoke a lot about income inequality as a contributing factor to dissatisfaction with government and status quo. And I'm curious because I feel like a lot of our modern technological landscape has put income inequality on full display, especially with the sort of rise of this technological oligarch class that we've seen over the last several years. So my question is, do you think that that part of the reason people are turning against the internet, social media, and a lot of modern technologies is because of its ability to put economic inequality on display in a public way? And do you think that as a whole, these technologies have been a contributor to income inequality, or is it misattributing existing inequalities to modern technology?
A lot there. I appreciate that question. Thank you for a very thoughtful question. I'm not sure there's going to the degree that I'm predicting, I think some kind of pushback against the technological world that we live in. I don't think that it's really going to be drawn or gain adherence because of the income inequality that technology reinforces and exacerbates. It will be, I think, a much more human reaction. I don't like how my kids are if they're just scrolling on the phone. I don't like how I find myself suddenly sucked in, doom scrolling, going through all of this stuff. And then I realize, oh my God, I've been spending 25 minutes doing that. And I don't even realize it. And I was like, I gotta put to sleep. I need to go do a crossword puzzle or read a book or something like that. So I think the drive will less be about the income inequality that technology services, then it's going to be more of a human reaction. I do want to say something just about, and let me put it this way. In coming out of COVID, we had a laptop recovery. And through COVID, we had a laptop economy. People called it the K economy. Basically, COVID shuts everything down. And if you could take your work home on a laptop, you kept your job for the most part. And if you couldn't, because you worked retail at the mall or service somebody at a restaurant or anything where a laptop was not part of your day-to-day basis, you got laid off because no one was coming. That exacerbated because higher income people, and it affected New Jersey's finances because we kept charging taxes to people who are making over $100,000 because that's the kind of person who ends up working on a laptop. So I think that reinforces your point how we are different worlds. There is this income inequality, technology dramatically affects it. We've seen that right there. But I think the pushback is not going to be from the person working retail. Because I don't use a laptop, I am somehow in the left house. The pushback is going to be, I don't like how my kid acts. Or we're losing something. And I think people are going to start talking about that.
To sort of maybe not answer your last question, is I think it's both, right? I mean, I think technology has exposed income inequality. I think it's also created more income inequality. I think it's suggest, right? I think it works on both levels. And I personally am, maybe this is generational for me, right? But I am pretty cynical or pretty down on particularly social media and the ability of, there was a lot of promise there, and we screwed it up, whatever that was, and whether that was because of inequality itself, right, in terms of who got to control it, or whether it's just because it was never going to work, I don't know. But I feel like, and it's what scares me about AI, to be frank with you too, is I feel like we screwed up social media so much that I don't trust us when it comes to AI. So the idea that I think the technology is, I don't know that it's going to turn people against, I don't know that it's income inequality that's turning people against technology, but I do think that technology has exacerbated income inequality, and it has put some of the people who have so much wealth on display, and created some cynicism sort of in that way. If I were a billionaire, I wouldn't be on Twitter. I don't really understand like that whole, but it's there, right? And it exists, and it sort of colors our perception of all of it. And I don't know, I won't descend into a Jeremy head on technology.
Do you have any science fellows? I feel like I've ignored science fellows. I'm going to Molly.
Hi, somewhat connected to that question. So we heard The Princess Bride. Other favorite fiction books that you would recommend or enjoyed reading? I think as a K-12 and middle school educator background, fiction I think is really important. Just reading in general. So I'd love to hear this.
So we could, how much time?
Yeah.
You get one.
I'm gonna give you two. I got one more now.
I'm gonna give you two. I think the two favorite books that I've read in the last couple of years. One is the book Chain Gang All Stars, that I really important book that I like. And then just because of the sort of style of it, this is a pretty famous book, but Never Let Me Go.
You know, I'm probably not a good person to answer this question because I really tend to read nonfiction. So, but I like John Irving a lot. I mean, I just get a lot out of his ability to span generations of stories. Yeah.
The only other book not the only book. I had friends when I was here who were getting their PhD, they defended, and I got them The Godfather, which I find, and I wrote to my friend Dave, that congratulations, this is the best book about politics I've ever read. Because in effect, it's about power, organization, and the fight for succession. That's what The Godfather is about. And if that ain't politics, that's what I mean. That's it. It helps. And plus, there's just so many cultural references. And as I mentioned, the Princess Bride, the book is way better than the movie. And the movie is really one of the best. So I would recommend that one as well.
By the way, just before we get off, sorry, Ginger, but very quickly, one of the New York Times did a list of the best 100 books of the 21st century that I've been working through. They're not all necessarily books I would put on the list, but it's a good starting point, sort of in terms of going through it. And then anything that Jesmyn Ward has ever read is something that you
Question.
First, thank you for that advice, Ben, about being a romantic. I think as being a young person in politics, that's a great way to think about it. When we often feel like we've done the work, some of us have been elected, you're just like sometimes they're just not getting it or representing us as the people. So that's a great way to think of it. That kind of really made it fit for me. So thank you for that. So thinking about there not being a party line, seeing what happened last night's race in CD11 and CD10, we know that our congressperson has been hitting the media nationally, talk about national headlines around ICE. What do you think, or do you think there will be an effect on that, on politics, on this next race that comes up, depending on what happens with her, she's facing 17 years. So what happens with that case? Do we think that will affect New Jersey politics? Do we think that will affect the upcoming race, if at all?
So I think that you could say that she was at the front of this backlash against ICE, which has now taken such hold popularly. I think she could look at how ICE has turned, arguably what was Trump's strongest issue, and made it one of his biggest liabilities. I think she could rightfully take some credit for that. Obviously, there's a lot more to it than that. There's a lot of tragedy that we can point to as well. But she has to look at the backlash against ICE and say, I had something to do with that. Now she's got to get through the criminal trial, as you said, which is not easy because prosecutors are taking a very narrow interpretation of that case. And did she touch the officer? Didn't she touch the officer, right? And so that's not going to be easy for her to navigate. But politically, I think that things have very much moved in her direction and in the direction that she would want this policy question to move.
Thank you all for being here. This question is directed toward all of you, but more towards you just because last semester you came into a class of mine called Legislative Policy Making.
Yes.
Which was, and within that class, we talked about the powers of the government itself. I think there was like an infographic or something that you showed that either New Jersey is at the top or one of where like the governorship is like it holds a lot of power compared to other states. Well, my question is, how do those powers that New Jersey clearly has over other states, how does that combat some of the federal government initiatives that we might see coming up in the future?
That's a good question. So first, to sort of take the first part, yes, if you are, and anybody up top has heard me say this before, but if you are around New Jersey government at all, ever, you will hear somebody say that New Jersey has the most powerful governor's office in the United States. I always like to say in class that I am a former lawyer, an academic, so I couch it. I say it's one of the most powerful, to give myself a little bit of an out there, right? Because it depends on how you sort of think about it, I don't like quantitative ways of sort of ranking states like that. So, but the bottom line is yes, New Jersey has a very powerful governor's office. In terms of how that interacts with the federal government, I think what it does is it gives the New Jersey governor a little bit more leeway from within the state to be able to sort of drive the conversation of how the state responds to the federal government. It doesn't necessarily make the governor more powerful in relation to the federal government, but in terms of how the state responds. I think the best, probably, I know we're sort of short on time, so the best maybe illustration of that is that in New Jersey, the governor appoints the attorney general. Now, there are restrictions to that, right? You can't fire, but the governor appoints the attorney general. If there are states where the attorney general is elected, that makes a huge difference, right? Because one of the ways it has become really popular for states to fight back against the federal government is a lawsuit. That lawsuit has to be driven by the attorney general. If the attorney general is someone who's been appointed by the governor, they're probably thinking alike in sort of those lines in terms of when the attorney general is going to sue. If they're separately elected, there could be different parties, right? And that has happened. And so they may not be on the same page. They may not see eye to eye, sort of like responses. So having that sort of unified theory of how the state, having that ability to control the entire executive department, which the governor essentially has in New Jersey, gives the governor a lot more options or a lot more sort of leeway, a lot more levers in terms of how she can respond to the federal government.
Sorry, I was just going to add that, look, when we talk about the powers of the governor, it really depends on the governor, the person, because that person can either use those powers effectively or not particularly effectively. And I think Chris Christie is an example of someone who used them largely very effectively. John Corzine was not nearly as successful, had the same powers, but just two different people. So you have these things. Anyway, I've just add that. Other than that, Chris, I think exactly right.
Speaking of Chris, so Chris, and my students hear me say this too, but Chris Christie in this room multiple times has used the quote that I have stolen from him over the years, which is the way he puts it is New Jersey has the constitutionally most powerful governing office in the United States. It doesn't matter if you don't know how to use it. Right? And that's sort of, we talk a lot in my class about formal power and contextual, informal sort of. Take my class sometime. We spend a lot of time.
All right, yeah, the biggest power that we're talking. I'm sorry, the biggest power is the appointment power, and it means simply using it effectively means you put people in place who are going to carry out your priorities. It ensures that your priorities across government, if you're doing it correctly, you put a team in place that's going to carry out your.
There we go. All right, I want to thank the panel.
And I also want to thank Ginger Wilson for providing. And thank our alumni online for joining today. We encourage you all, everyone in this room, as well as everyone online, to get involved. Some ways you can do that are to check out the action items on the Eagleton 70th anniversary page. There's also ways to get involved in action items on the Rutgers Democracy Lab page. Connect with and follow Eagleton online and sign up for our e-news if you're not already on there. Support the nonpartisan education programs and students that we serve across Rutgers University. And to just a reminder to look for this recording. It will be available to everyone in the room as well as everyone online on Eagleton's YouTube channel, and to revisit all of the lessons and really wise advice that we heard here today and insight as well. So thank you everyone for joining.
I have